question of the day. We're very excited. We've been getting a lot of feedback from schools about the kind of lasting effects on COVID and students learning from home for such a long period of time. They're coming back with more signs of depression and anxiety, and we are so lucky to have Lizelle Salazar, a Master of Public Health, who is the Senior Outreach Specialist at the University of Michigan's Depression Center. She received her Bachelor of Science in Psychology from Michigan State University and received her Master's of Public Health in Health Behavior and Health Education from the University of Michigan. Since 2012, Lizelle has worked in numerous youth-serving organizations and is incredibly passionate about adolescent health. In her role at the Depression Center, Lizelle primarily coordinates and provides program evaluation for an awesome program called Peer-to-Peer, Peer-to-Peer Depression Awareness Program, which is a youth-driven mental health program for middle school and high school students. She currently manages the program's Detroit Public Schools expansion, is also involved in many other outreach initiatives, including the Campus Mind Works, Athletes Connected, and safeTALK and mental health education training. So, without further ado, I will turn it over to Lizelle. And again, just real quick, if you're able to have your cameras on, I think we'll get a better presentation as the presenters can see your reactions to the information that they're sharing. So if you are able to, we certainly encourage you to have those cameras on throughout each of our presentations. So Lizelle, I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ben. And thank you so much, Project Healthy Schools, for having me here today. And yeah, I'm excited to discuss mental health with all of you. So just give me a second to share my screen. All right. So today we're going to be talking about depression and anxiety in teens. So as Ben just mentioned, my name is Lizelle Salazar. So again, just a little bit more background about me, because I know sometimes these virtual conferences can be a little awkward because you don't get that personalization. So as Ben mentioned, I work for the University of Michigan Eisenberg Family Depression Center, and I manage the peer-to-peer program that we have. And then our peer-to-peer program is in a number of Washtenaw County schools, as well as some schools in other areas of Michigan. And the program aims to educate middle and high school students about depression, anxiety, and other related mental illnesses, and provide them support as they create an effective mental health awareness campaign for their school. So on the left here, I have a picture of me and my supervisor and some of the posters that students have created in the past. This is when we celebrated our 10-year anniversary of the program. And in the middle here, I have the Spartan head, because even though I've been at University of Michigan longer than I've been a Spartan, longer than I was an undergrad at Michigan State, I root for Michigan State, and I say go green, not go blue. So for anyone that is a Michigan State supporter out there, I feel you. And then I also just wanted to give some context that this is a picture of me and my husband on the right here. And my husband is actually a teacher. So he is a teacher in Pontiac School District over in Oakland County, and he teaches 8th and 9th grade. So I've encountered some incidences with him where he comes up to me and then he's like, hey, I'm concerned about this student. They wrote something on their response that has me a little concerned. What should I do about it? And I've seen from him, and also through my work with schools, that there is an increase in mental health issues since the pandemic. But even before then, the trend of increasing mental health issues was going up and up. I also wanted to give a little bit of a trigger warning. So just so you know, I will be talking about depression, anxiety, and suicide today. And I know that there are many personal experiences that are going to be in this conference, and then the participants that we have here today. So if you ever have to take a moment to take care of yourself, I encourage you to do so. And if you are looking for any resources for yourself or your students, I can help assist with that. And I know you guys are all coming from different parts of the state, so I would also encourage you to look into your own county mental health and what resources they have available for you. And then I also just want to mention, feel free to unmute yourself, interrupt me, or put stuff in the chat. I'm totally okay with being interrupted. So first, what does mental health mean? So mental health is talking about our mental emotional state. It affects how we think, how we feel, and it's related to our well-being, which is made up of many different dimensions of our life, and each of these dimensions influence one another. So over here, I have a picture of what we call a wellness wheel. I'm not sure if Project Healthy Schools has worked with this, but this wellness wheel talks about that there is 8 different dimensions of health. So giving this full context of health, not just focusing on physical, mental, but saying that environmental, the environment that we live in affects our health, financial, so if we're living in poverty, that also can affect our health in many ways, occupational. Do you have an occupation that is allowing you to thrive and providing you happiness? Social, do you have a support system that is able to help you through different things? Intellectual, do you feel like you're being intellectually challenged? That's also part of it. And then spiritual. So spiritual can either be a religious association, or it can just be acts of mindfulness or connecting with your sense of purpose. So the idea is that there are all these different dimensions of health. And then in order for us to live a balanced and healthy life, we would like to focus on each one of these dimensions. So if you imagine that each one of these little petals on this image is a spoke on the wheel, that wheel is going to turn and rotate better if each one of those spokes is equal. So when one of those spokes on the wheel might be shorter and then the other one longer, the wheel's not going to turn and it's going to break. So it's just emphasizing that to live a healthy life, we would like to have a balance of each one of these dimensions of wellness. And then I do apologize, I was presenting yesterday and then my slides don't forward when I want them to, so bear with me. All right, so let me ask all of you, since you all are focused with physical health, being involved with Project Healthy Schools and being wellness champions, how do you think physical health and mental health interact with one another? So you can either answer by unmuting yourself or saying something in the chat. How do you think these two dimensions relate to one another? All right. Increased physical health can improve mental health. Yes, thank you, Nicole. Definitely, an increase in physical health can increase mental health, and it can also go the opposite way. So that same thing with the brain activation that Ben showed of a decrease in activation, giving yourself that, so if you're sitting around all day, that can actually decrease your mood. Awesome, so I'm getting a lot more. Eric said directly, tough to have one without the other. I love that answer, Eric. That is very true. Heidi said, I would say physical health is a bedrock for allowing mental health. Yes, definitely, Heidi. If you have some physical pain / issues, it'll impact your mental well-being. Thank you for adding that, Andrea, because I actually work with student athletes, and injury for these student athletes here at University of Michigan is a huge part in like their mental health state. They tend to withdraw when they go through physical injury, and often need assistance after experiencing injury. When your body feels good, you feel good. Yes, thank you for just keeping that nice and simple. Stephanie said more physical movement, release endorphins. Yes, kind of that Legally Blonde saying where endorphins make you happy. Happy people don't just go off and kill people. Jacob said they both directly correlate with each other to succeed in daily lifelong. Yes. Jasmine said physical health is the foundation on one's mental health. If your body is not right, your mind will not be right. Yes, definitely. I know that you guys see that connection. So to go into the data a little bit more. So with sleep, actually majority of people with mental health conditions also have sleeping problems. So they either might be sleeping more or they might be sleeping less. And as people mentioned in the chat, 30 minutes or more of exercise a day for 3 to 5 days a week may lessen symptoms. And there's actually research going on right now that physical activity might be as effective for some people with depression in relieving symptoms than medication. So there's research going on right now, like, can we replace medication for some people with depression with exercise? Also, healthy diet plays a good role in reducing the risk of developing depression symptoms. And then let me open the chat because I see some more responses. Gives you more empathy for our senior citizens. Yes, definitely. There's a lot of people struggling who are part of our elderly population as well. Awesome. So there is that connection between physical health and mental health. And then, so what impacts mental health? So we're looking here at what we refer to as the biopsychosocial model. And then, so it just means that many things impact someone's mental health. And so biology, so for some people, they might be genetically predisposed to having depression or anxiety. So their parents have it, their siblings have it. They are more likely to have mental health issues as well. Psychological, so coping skills and social skills actually can improve mental health. And then with social and environmental, your environment can also have an impact on your mental health. So I don't know if everyone has heard of ACEs, but that stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. So what you experience as a child has a huge impact and then on how you are going to develop later in life and what mental health issues you might have later in life. So as a child, if you're experiencing trauma, that most likely will develop into mental health issues later in life. So now we're going to go into how common is it. So depression and anxiety are both common but serious illnesses. So 50% of all lifetime cases of mental illness begin by age 14. So I know many of you are coming from middle schools. A lot of this is starting at that middle school age. And then around half of adolescents met criteria for mental health disorders. Sorry, I see something else in the chat. Oh, thank you, Ben, for recommending the book. I have not read that. Thank you. And then 14.3% of youth ages 13 to 17 have depression or bipolar disorder. And then as a caveat, this was measured in 2017. So we know that there's been increases since then. About a third of 13 to 18-year-olds have diagnosable anxiety. 37% of students with depression or anxiety will receive mental health treatment. So this one is like a shocking one for me because many people who are experiencing depression or anxiety symptoms, only a third of them are actually receiving mental health treatment. So there's this big gap between experiencing symptoms and whether they're getting connected to help. And then suicide is actually the second leading cause of death among 10 to 24-year-olds. So suicide is only after accidental death. So accidental death is the first leading cause of suicide, leading cause of death for that age range, and then comes suicide right after. So this is a big issue for this population. I know some of these are going into more of the high school age range, but there's not as much data actually of the middle school population and mental health issues, and I wish there was. So typically, if you look at the data, it's grouped into 6 to 12-year-olds and then 13 through 18-year-olds. But we know there's such a huge difference between a 6-year-old and a 12-year-old. But that's how the data is grouped right now. So I more leaned on the data of the 13 to 18-year-olds because that 6 to 12-year-old data is very variable, and I wish they kind of close that age range a bit. But in this next slide, I can show you that you can see that these mental health conditions, they increase as in prevalence as age increases. So for depression, anxiety, and behavioral disorders, well, for depression and anxiety, you see that increase once they go to 12 to 17. And then for behavior disorders, that's actually more prevalent in the 6 to 11-year-old age. Sorry, my slide is stuck again. All right. So now to talk about how the pandemic has affected mental health in teens. So we are still looking at data. There's still data being collected on this, but from what we do know, they have found out that 1 in 4 youth globally are experiencing elevated depression symptoms, and 1 in 5 youth globally are experiencing elevated anxiety symptoms. So it's not just in your head that you have seen that there's an increase in mental health issues. There's data to back it up. Substance use rates have also increased among this age group. And then an increase in use of social media has also led to an increased rate of anxiety and depression. And I will also add to this, there's been an increase in eating disorders as a result of the increased use of social media during the pandemic. And then if you have a chance, I encourage you to also look at Facebook and Instagram. They did data collection on teen mental health, and then that got released recently, and it's pretty scary that Instagram knows that it's negatively affecting teen mental health, but they kind of just let it go. They didn't do anything with that data. So I would encourage you to look at that if you're interested, and I can share that with you later on if you would like. 81% of teens aged 13 through 17 have experienced more intense stress during the pandemic. I think we can all agree that it's not just that age range, but all of us have experienced more intense stress. And compared to 2019, mental health related visits to the emergency department have increased by 31% for 12 to 17-year-olds. So definitely there has been an increase in mental health issues and people needing support. So now I'm going to turn it back to all of you. What do you think depression and anxiety look like? What have you been noticing in your students that might make you think this student has depression, the student's struggling? Yeah, let me know in the chat. And it could just be something small, something that you noticed in change detachment. Yeah, Brian, withdrawal is definitely, oh, I see withdrawal is a huge one that teachers are noticing. Yes, not engaging with others, not participating, keeping themselves quiet. Yeah, so withdrawal seems to be the big issue that people have been seeing. The lack of wanting to do anything, yes. So that is also a symptom of not wanting to do activities that you once enjoyed. Withdrawn from typical habits. Andrea, I love that you added the word typical, because that is something that we like to add about noticing is there a change in their behavior from what they typically are? Change of friendships, interests, students that do not engage with the lesson, they keep their head down. Yes, lots of sleeping students, that could be a sign. Yeah, Jasmine, I like how you pointed that out, of sometimes they're considered the class clown or the bad kids, hiding their emotions and issues going on at school and at home. So for some students, that's their way of coping, is to be the comedian, to show irritability. And that's how it comes off, and people might push them away because they think, oh, that's just the class clown, that's the bad kid, but there might be something deeper. Disconnected, oh yes, the online video gaming, I've heard that a lot, Jolinda. Yes, Fortnite, so the video games again. So I've seen that of withdrawing from like physical social interactions and engaging in these internet connections. And I don't have it in here, but we know from research that engaging face-to-face really boosts your mood much more than engaging in these virtual connections. Thank you so much for everyone adding. So on top of what everyone just said in the chat, here are some of the symptoms of depression and anxiety. Oh, Jolinda, researching how to incorporate TikTok in my lessons. I still have not figured out TikTok, so good luck with that. It's a whole new world for me. Depression. So for depression, it's for people with depression, they feel very low and or have a loss of interest, like someone mentioned in the chat, for 2 weeks or more, including any of these symptoms, such as changes in sleep. So again, that could be an increase in sleep or lack of sleep. Feeling angry or irritable. So this is where they might be diagnosed or be labeled as that bad kid, instead of thinking that this kid might have depression. They might have a lack of energy, feelings of guilt, loss of concentration, or making decisions. So this is where they might be disengaging from your lesson when they typically are more engaged. Changes in appetite. So they might be coping by eating, or they might be eating less. Physical aches and pains. So this is one that actually often gets missed. But with depression, sometimes it could turn into a physical ache and pain, such as like a stomach ache. And they've actually found this to be more prevalent in the Asian American population, that physical aches and pains are more of the symptom that Asian Americans report for depression. Hopelessness and also thoughts of suicide can be a sign of depression. And then it's important to know that people can have any of these number of signs and symptoms, but what's important is that if they have a number of these that's lasting for 2 weeks or more, and it's getting in the way of their daily functioning. Just gonna look at the chat really quick to see if yes, loss of appetite, Heidi. And then for anxiety symptoms, so anxiety is overly excessive worry that happens almost every day for more than 6 months. And then signs can be difficulty controlling worry, feeling restless or on edge, being easily fatigued, difficulty concentrating or mind going blank, changes in sleep, physical symptoms including muscle tension, nausea, dizziness, etc. And again, what's important here is that it's getting in the way of someone's daily functioning. So you can also see that a lot of these symptoms, not a lot of these symptoms, but some of these symptoms for depression and anxiety overlap with one another. So changes in sleep can be a depression symptom and an anxiety symptom, or difficulty concentrating. So I wanted to point that out to let you know that sometimes people can experience both depression and anxiety. That's a common comorbidity, or depression and ADHD. So that's also a possibility. So to kind of bust some myths about depression, I wanted to point out that depression is not the blues, being sad, stressed out, or upset. All of these are normal feelings to have, but again, we want to point out that depression is getting in the way of someone's daily functioning and lasting 2 weeks or more. Depression is not a sign of personal weakness. Depression cannot be controlled through willpower. People can't just snap out of it. It's not just caused by a bad day, and it's not someone looking for attention. But depression is chemical changes in the brain, which we will talk about in just a moment. And it can be genetic, and it involves intense, persistent symptoms that last 2 weeks or more and gets in the way of our ability to live our everyday life. But it's important to know that depression is common and treatable. So similar to the image that Ben just showed, so thanks for leading me right into this then. We have an fMRI image over here of brain activity for a depressed person and a person that does not have depression. So similarly to the image that you just saw about activity, those with depression, there's less brain activity that is going on for people with depression. So that might be why they are unable to concentrate, or they have changes in their eating or sleeping patterns. For a person that is not depressed, you see all these, that red, that's the brain activity. So you can see that this actually has scientific evidence that there is a difference in people with a depressed and not depressed brain. So some people have the myth that it's not a medical illness, it's just in someone's head, but it really actually is in someone's head. There is actual evidence to prove that. All right, let me look at the chat for a sec. Yes, there is such a stigma of acknowledging it in different cultures, says Jolinda. I will speak for myself that I am Filipino, Asian American, and there is a huge stigma in my culture around depression. My brother has depression. He had suicidal thoughts and made an attempt, and there was no talk about it. And since doing my work here, my family has been more open to talking about different mental health issues, but still it's kind of pushed under the rug, which is unfortunate. But I think as teens are being more open about talking about mental health, it's forcing parents and grandparents to also be more open to talk about mental health. Yes, Carrie also said different genders. So there's also the stigma around males having mental health issues. So in our society, it's expected that males have to be strong. And if you have depression or anxiety, then you're seen as weak. You shouldn't show your weakness. You shouldn't show your feelings. So that tends to be that males don't seek out as much help as females. So they might be experiencing similar levels of depression and anxiety, but we don't know as much because males are less likely to seek out help because of that stigma that exists. Yes, also.
Hey, Lizelle, this is Ben. I have a question. A couple slides back when you were highlighting some of the signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety. I think it's the depression. So these are like lasting signs for like 2 weeks or more. And then anxiety was like six months or more. So, you know, from a teacher's perspective, hopefully that doesn't mean that if you notice changes in a student that you should watch, you know, those changes for 2 weeks before you think, maybe I should do something to help support this student. Is that like for a clinical diagnosis that those symptoms have to persist at that length? But, you know,
yes,
teachers.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ben, for pointing that out. Those are for clinical diagnoses, and I am not expecting anyone to diagnose or say like that student has depression, that student has anxiety. I just want people on this call to just notice if there are changes, and if you are noticing there are changes, you can talk directly to the student, or if you have a school counselor or social worker, connect with them and say, hey, I've noticed that Ben has been missing class, has been having a difficult time concentrating, and typically he's a very alert student. I'm a little concerned about him. Could you talk to him and just see what's going on? Or you can do that yourself. And so actually in later slides, we'll be talking about how to approach a student if you are concerned about them. But yes, not expecting you guys to be clinicians. I am not a clinician myself. I have a public health background. I'm not a mental health clinician. So definitely it's really just about noticing differences in students and connecting them to the appropriate resources. Yes, and then also Jolinda said with the LGBTQ population, there are higher rates in that population as well, because they might be more reluctant to seek out help, or they might be feeling rejected based on their identity. And then Heidi added that COVID has had such a drastic impact on our students and their physical activity. Yes, then we also get them up and active and see if that brain activity changes. Yes, so it's actually called, the formal term in the mental health field is called behavioral activation, but that is often a tool that many clinicians use, is make sure that the person who is struggling is getting activated in some way. So maybe that's just moving their body. And they've also shown that with depression, actually just like if you do like high impact activity for just 10 minutes, that can actually be a really good increase in your mood. Yes, generational aspects factor in, I think, as well, says Heidi. I agree. So definitely in terms of help seeking, this young population is great in that they are so open about talking about mental health, and they're more open to seeking out help. I will give a little warning, is a trend that I've seen working with students recently is that they have been watching TikTok videos and thinking that they can self-diagnose themselves that way and get help by just watching a bunch of TikTok videos rather than seeing a clinician. So definitely would steer students into seeing an actual face-to-face professional or someone that they can see with teletherapy if possible. All right, so let me stop sharing for a second so I can optimize the video clip. But I like this video. It quickly shows the signs of teen depression. All right.
Do you feel like you just can't get happy? Are you finding you're pulling away from friends? Do you sometimes sit in your room in the dark, not even realizing how many hours have passed? Depression can affect anyone, especially teens. About 20% of all teens experience depression before they reach adulthood. That's a worrying statistic. When singer Will Smith's daughter, came out and said she suffered with depression, the comments at the bottom of many articles were attacking her, saying, "What have you got to be depressed about?" A lot of people don't understand that mental illnesses don't discriminate between age or circumstance. Often, depression is even more difficult to recognize in young people than adults, because as a teen, you experience so many changes at this stage in your life. But the longer you feel this way, the more likely it's going to disrupt your life and turn into a long-term problem. So Psych2Go shares with you 5 ways to recognize depression. 1. Continuous low mood or sadness. Do you often feel very sad and low for a prolonged period of time? If you're feeling this way, things that normally lift your mood won't bring the same joy and happiness. You may feel low or cry for no specific reason. It's a good time to reach out and talk to someone. 2. Being irritable or intolerant of others. Irritability can be missed as a symptom of depression, as you're often stereotyped as moody and irritable already. It's also a very common symptom of depression. Often you'll have a very short temper and snap at people you love for no apparent reason. If you notice a change in your mood, it might be best to discuss it with someone, a parent, a school counselor, doctor, or a friend. Even if you think you're just having a rough time at school, it might not be depression, but talking it out helps to get the whole picture. 3. Showing feelings of helplessness. If you're suffering with depression, you'll feel out of depth, like you aren't in control of your life. You can feel completely helpless and confused. While these feelings are normal as you go through changes in your body and growing up, be aware if this symptom persists for longer than a few weeks. Feelings of unhappiness, worry, guilt, being fearful, helpless, hopeless, or lonely could all be signifying that something more serious is wrong. 4. Increasing social isolation. Do you want to just be left alone? When you're not feeling like yourself and your mood is low, it can lead to social isolation. It can be hard being around people because you feel like you have to act like you normally would. This emotional strain can cause you to give up socializing altogether. If you notice you're starting to withdraw from people, talk to someone. Even if you feel you're just having difficulties with friends, it may not always be a sign of depression, but dealing with it now can help stop it turning into something more. 5. Little to no enjoyment of things you once liked. Have you lost interest in being involved in after-school clubs, music practice, or sports? Do you feel like you don't want to go and are contemplating dropping out? You might not even watch your favorite TV shows with as much interest. Not enjoying things you once liked could be a sign you're depressed. Have you struggled with depression? What do you do to?
Yeah, I like that video because it's a nice quick summary of the signs and really gives some good examples.
Do you feel like you just can't get?
All right, so diving a little bit more into anxiety. So I want to mention that some level of anxiety is good, it's healthy. So we are meant to be anxious for a reason. It has helped with our survival, but with people that have an anxiety disorder, it's sometimes they are being anxious when there's not a threat to them immediately, or that anxiety is going on for a long period of time. So for people, for when you feel anxious, your body gets ready to do fight, flight, or freeze in order to defend itself. And that's our survival technique. So really just this slide is just to point out that some level of anxiety is normal and healthy. So if you're getting anxious before presenting or anxious before meeting someone new, that's totally normal. It doesn't mean that you have an anxiety disorder. But again, going back to, is anxiety these symptoms lasting for 6 months or more, and is it impairing your daily functioning? Oh, Jolinda, great. Yes, that video is from Psych2Go. And I think Ben will also share these slides afterwards with you guys. So this next video is a personal story from one of our peer-to-peer student members. And then I like this because she talks about how she has actually experienced anxiety most of her life. So she actually started therapy in 5th grade and then moved on to medication in high school. But kind of shows, since many of you are working with that younger population, that this can occur early on. And Carolyn will share how she has handled it.
I've lived with anxious thoughts my entire life. Starting at a young age, I grew incredibly anxious whenever I was separated from my mother and my family, and this anxiety only grew as I got older. I would feel as though my stomach were tied up in knots, my heart would race, and my breathing would grow shallow. By the time I was in 5th grade, my anxiety was so extensive that my mother decided I needed to see a therapist. At the time, I was hesitant to go because I didn't know anyone else who went to therapy, and I was worried that my going to therapy would further alienate me from my peers, in addition to my anxiety. I quickly came to see that therapy was not an isolating space, but rather the beginning of a still ongoing journey towards improving my mental health. The transition into middle school was very challenging for me, and even the smallest thing, like misplacing my class schedule, was enough to fully provoke my anxiety. Oftentimes, I would feel nauseous as soon as I got to school, and I'd watch the clock count down until the end of the day. With my therapist, we use various methods of cognitive behavioral therapy to help me mitigate those feelings. One key tool I found through therapy was the use of index cards, where I would write on the front side what my current trouble was, what I was thinking that was making me feel anxious, and on the other side, I would write the solution. Towards the end of middle school, I also started seeing a psychiatrist who recommended I start medication. I was relieved to find that after beginning medication, I was better able to manage my anxiety. There's a stigma against using medication for mental health issues, which is only a part of a larger stigma around mental illness. We as a culture need to realize that proper treatment of mental health is just as important as physical wellness. To help reduce the stigma around mental illness, I'm a member of the peer-to-peer program at my school. P2P is a collaboration between the University of Michigan's Depression Center and the local public schools, with the goal of spreading mental health awareness. The campaigns create a platform for open conversation, including space for people to share stories of their mental health journeys. For so much of my life, I felt as though I was the only one struggling with my mental health, but hearing testimonials from other high schoolers and U of M students helped me realize that I wasn't alone. At P2P, we organize speakers, assemblies, and also give out things like stress balls and wristbands that help spread our message. It's one thing to study mental illness in classes or even read about it in books or online, but seeing real people in my life talk about their struggles fully changed my perception of mental illness. As young students, it can be really difficult to know how to get mental health help. It can feel awkward to discuss mental health with your parents, and so many people worry that having mental health struggles will separate them from their friends and peers. But the truth is, having open conversations about mental health brings people together. I feel closer to my parents now that we can discuss how I'm feeling. It's okay to be afraid to start your journey toward better mental health, but once you get past that initial worry, you'll be setting yourself on a path to help yourself and improve your relationship with your friends, family, and everyone else around you. Mental illness is not something that ever fully goes away, and my anxiety will always be there. However, because of the treatment I've sought, combined with the support of my friends and family, I know I'll have the tools I need to manage my anxiety as I move forward with my life.
See that we have some things in the chat. Oh, Jasmine, the things that she wrote on her index card. So she would write her troubles and on the front, and then there, here. My troubles, my current trouble on the front, and what I was thinking on the front, and then on the back, she would write her solution. Yeah, so Carolyn, I like that she has struggled with anxiety her whole life, and I like that she points that out, because some people think like, oh, you've been in therapy, you've had medication, like you should be good, like why are you still doing this? Sometimes there's that myth that goes around, but she actively works towards better mental health every single day, and then so she has become an advocate for mental health in her school and her community, and really showing people that therapy and medication have been effective for her, and sharing her experience as well. That's something that's been very powerful for students that I've heard, is hearing other people's stories and knowing that they're not alone, and finding a community that they can relate to. So again, depression and anxiety are treatable. So just like we mentioned before, healthy lifestyle can be a good component to positive mental health, engaging in coping strategies such as cognitive behavioral therapy and that note card system that Carolyn mentioned, or doing mindfulness, yoga, physical activity, education, just educating people, educating themselves about mental health and depression and anxiety can help. Support from friends, family, other people such as therapists and psychiatrists, and for professional treatment. So therapy and medication are effective treatments for both depression and anxiety, and often it's a combination of both of them that is the most effective for people. And then briefly, just wanted to mention that there are also unhealthy coping strategies. And then so these coping strategies will only just give people a temporary moment of relief and often are dangerous. So substance use, use of alcohol and other drugs can also be a sign that someone might be struggling with their mental health, self-harm, or engaging in risk-taking behaviors. So talking about suicide, I want to say that if you hear any talk of suicide, or if you have any sort of feeling that someone might be suicidal or having suicidal thoughts, it's good to connect them with a person that can help them immediately. So talk of suicide is definitely a key warning sign to look out for, but in addition to that, there is being preoccupied with death in conversation, writing, or drawing, giving away belongings, personal possessions, withdrawing from friends and family, having aggressive or hostile behavior, neglecting personal appearance, running away from home, reckless driving, or being sexually promiscuous, or it could be a change in personality. So you might see that some of these overlap with signs and symptoms of depression as well, but it could be a combination of these things. But if you have any inkling that someone might be suicidal, definitely connect them to help immediately. So I'm gonna go through a couple of polls here. I think Ben's gonna put it up. Is that right, Ben?
Sherry will be putting those up for us.
Okay. So kind of just wanted to briefly bust through some myths about suicide. So answer in the poll over here, talking about suicide or asking someone if they are suicidal will put the idea in their head. Is that true or false? All right, I'll give you 5 more seconds to respond. And then these are all anonymous, I think. So false. So everyone said false, which is correct. So talking about suicide or asking someone if they are suicidal will not put the idea in their head. The truth is that people are not that easy to convince. So if I asked you to give me your whole entire salary for the year, most likely you will say no. Often people avoid asking about suicide or talking about suicide thinking that it might put the idea in their head, and that's completely false. Actually, direct and open talk about suicide is what is helpful for people with suicidal thoughts. So we'll go on to our next question. So what do you think, true or false? Impulsive suicides are rare. So by impulsive, I mean that if someone has thoughts of suicide and then making their attempts, that there's a short time between the two. Give 5 more seconds. All right. So thank you. So this is actually pretty split in your answers. So this is a common myth, and this is common misunderstanding, is that impulsive suicides are actually rare. So most of the time, if someone is having thoughts of suicide, they are having those thoughts for a long time, because people with thoughts of suicide, they do not want to die, they want to live. So most of the time they are showing signs that they are crying out for help. They might not be directly saying it in obvious ways, but they might be signaling in different ways, such as I can't go on anymore, or they might be withdrawing, or they might be isolating themselves. So there might be a couple of signs that are leading up to it, that they're crying for help before they make an attempt. So impulsive suicides are rare. There's usually a lot of signs that a suicidal person is giving before they make an attempt. All right, our last question. People who talk about suicide are looking for attention, true or false? Give it 5 more seconds. All right, so this one is false. So people who talk about suicide are not just looking, well, okay, this is actually a tricky question, because I realize this was actually made by, this presentation was made by a colleague of mine. So people who talk about suicide are not looking for attention in the way that they're just trying to get notice and then get someone to, I mean, not getting notice. Let me rephrase all of this. People who talk about suicide, they are hoping that someone can help them out. They are trying to cry out for help and say that I need help. And they are giving these signs because they want someone to connect them to help, because again, they want to live. So I get why this question is split, because now I realize that this question was worded poorly. So I apologize for that. But it's important to just, again, know that if you hear any talk of suicide, take that seriously. It's usually not someone just joking about it. There might be some underlying issue. Even if they say that they were just joking about it, there might be some other underlying issue happening that they need to get addressed. So take all talks of suicide seriously and connect them to the appropriate resources. Thank you for the person that was doing the polls. I believe that was Sherry. Now we're going to talk about how to help students. So now that you know all this information, how can we help students if we notice that they're struggling? So first, notice any changes in behaviors or emotions that they might be having. So as someone said previously in the chat, if there's any changes from typical behavior. Next, check in and ask if something feels off. Sorry, it says with a peer, but I mean with a student. So you can say that I've noticed that you, and then talk about any signs that you've noticed that might have brought you to be concerned about them. So you can say, I've noticed, Ben, that you have been not coming to class. And when you do come to class, you're not very focused or you're sleeping. I just wanted to check in. How are you doing? So once you engage them in conversation, listen and reflect back what they are saying to you, validate any feelings that they're having, and if appropriate, encourage help seeking by knowing your resources. So what resources are in your school and your community that you can connect them to? You can say to them, this is important, what you're telling me. Can we connect you with a school counselor to figure out how to best support you? So often this is just telling them that that their feelings are valid, and you just want to create a better support team for them so that we can provide the best help to get them better. And then afterwards, go ahead and follow up with them and see how they are doing once you connect them to help. Thank you, Sherry, for that warning. So these are different conversation starters. I know that sometimes it can be awkward to bridge that, start that conversation. So this is just to point out that it doesn't have to be this very prescriptive thing. It can be pretty casual. You can say, "Are you okay? You don't seem like yourself lately. I know you're going through some stuff. I'm here for you." You can, if you're a coach, you can say, "We have missed you at practice lately. How have you been?" It can be very simple to just start that conversation. So we like to say call it seize the awkward. So seize the awkward in starting conversations. And then during the conversation, you can go ahead and keep it casual. You're not their therapist, so keep it as a chat, not a therapy session. Listen to them and validate them, let them take the lead. Avoid offering advice or trying to fix their problem. I know for many of us, we're fixers, and this is really hard. Validate their feelings, ask open-ended questions, make yourself available, so available for that follow-up or to check in at different other moments, and encourage them to talk to an expert. Oops. And then after the conversation, encourage them to seek out help from a mental health professional if appropriate. And then if they shut you down, don't give up. If you are concerned about them, maybe tell a school counselor and say, "Hey, I'm concerned about this student. Can you follow up with them?" And then keep those invitations going. So just keep coming up to them, asking them how you're doing. It seems so simple, but just that little check-in means so much to students. All right, so we will not do this breakout. And I just wanted to briefly mention helping a student in crisis. So if you think that that student is suicidal and that they are in imminent risk, they might be saying things like, "I give up, it's not worth it anymore, I'm going to kill myself," or "I wanted to say goodbye to everyone, I won't be here after tomorrow, I have a plan, but wanted to say goodbye first." Again, in these situations, you must tell a mental health professional immediately. And you can also contact emergency services like 911, or most of you have a mobile mental health crisis unit in your county. I know that they tried to make that prevalent in every county throughout Michigan. Key point is here that it is not your job to provide total support for those who are struggling, and because you are a teacher, you have a ton of responsibilities. Instead, just aim to connect students to appropriate support services. And I think this is my last slide, this next one. Yes. So any questions, you can feel free to email me. If your school is interested in our peer-to-peer program, we are expanding to other schools, so you can go ahead and visit our website or our Instagram, or contact me if you would like more information. And I will stop sharing because that is the end of my time. If there's any questions, I don't know if I can answer a quick one, or you can just email me.
Do we have time for a question or two if there's any imminent questions out there right now? Again, I popped into the chat. We will be sharing all of the presentations, including the PowerPoints today, via our PHS portal, so you will have access to that. I would highly suggest inquiring a little bit more about the peer-to-peer program through the U of M's Depression Center. It is an outstanding program. So if you're noticing a lot of students, in crisis or struggling with mental health or depression or anxiety, it could be a fabulous resource or program for your school moving forward. So, got time for a question? Any questions out there? Otherwise, we'll let Lizelle move on with her day. All right, Lizelle, that was fabulous. Thank you. And I really liked one of the last points is just keep the invitation going, right? Just because I ask a student and they don't feel like talking about it today, if I keep asking them, I think the more I ask them, the more willing they'll be to talk to me about it. So I really like that as kind of find a strategy there.
I've also heard from students that it's the way that you ask. So as long as that you're showing that you care about them, that really just goes a long way. So if you're just, there's a difference between like the Midwest, like, hey, how you doing? Good. Yeah, how are you? Good. Versus like, no, like, how are you really doing? So just showing that you care just goes a long way. And I know you all are doing fabulous things at your schools. And yeah, please contact me if you have any questions. Oh, Jasmine, I don't know if we have, if I should, do I have time, Ben, to
Yeah,
answer
go ahead.
that?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so Jasmine said, how to go about students venting to you, but they do not want to talk to a counselor or parent. How should one go about the situation? So great question, Jasmine. I know that many students are more connected with their teachers than they are with their parents or school counselor. But again, it's just, I think what really helps is just saying like, hey, like, I really care about you. This is super important, but I only know so much. So in order to give you the best support possible and get you connected to the best help, we're going to have to bring in another person. And then you can give the option. Do you want that other person to be the school counselor? Do you want it to be a parent? Or do you want to contact a mental health professional outside of the school? So depending on their age, that also can be tricky because they have to be age 12 to seek out mental health services on their own. But I think that really resonates with students is like, we're just building a bigger support team to get you the best help possible and then giving them options. So not saying like, we have to go to your parent, saying like, these are a couple of options that we can go to. Which one do you feel most comfortable with? All right, thank you so much, Project Healthy Schools. Again, contact me if you have any questions.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you again, Lizelle. Outstanding. And again, yep, we'll be sharing out Lizelle's contact info, but also feel free to reach out to your Project Healthy Schools Wellness Coordinator, who can also put you in touch with Lizelle and her team for additional support moving forward.